Welcome to Provident Vox. I'm Baron Aragni.
And I'm Baroness Aragni.
Alright, today we're going to tackle something that's been haunting the internet for years. We're talking about the nightmare that is the misinformation around thought forms, egregores, servitors, you name it. If you ever tried to Google these terms, you probably walked away more confused than when you started.
Exactly. And we thought that if people are going to throw these words around, we might as well make an episode that clears up at least some of the chaos. Consider this your audio compass in the labyrinth of nonsense. Also, as a bonus for us, when people ask us in the future, we can just say, yeah, we did a whole episode on that. Go listen to it. Saves us a bit of sanity.
Which frankly is in short supply. So let's get right into it. First things first, what is a thought form, and why do we have so many different names for the same thing? Thought form, servitor, egregore, construct, and even further still.
At the core, a thought form is exactly what it sounds like, something created from thought. It's a mental construct designed, either intentionally or by accident, to serve a particular purpose. That's what makes it different from external spirits or entities. Spirits exist whether you acknowledge them or not. Thought forms, on the other hand, are built. They don't just pop into being as naturally as, say, a wandering spirit.
Right. You can create them consciously, that's a preferred way, or subconsciously, which tends to be a mess. Like how people say don't dwell on negativity, you'll attract more of it. Well, if you stew in certain thoughts or group obsessions long enough, congratulations, you might just have built yourself an accidental thought form. Let us tell you, that is something that you do not want.
Once created, thought forms aren't that different from external entities. They can perform tasks, they can influence situations, they can communicate with you, they feed on energy, grow stronger, and if things really escalate, they can become god-tier powerful.
So in short, call them created entities if you like, because that's basically what they are. You make them, they run with the programming, sometimes literally.
Now let's break this down a bit. Not all thought forms are equal. You got the simple ones, which have no form, no personality, and one clear purpose. They might not look like much on paper, but don't underestimate them. A single-purpose thought form can still pack quite a punch.
Then you've got the advanced builds, if you will. These can be extremely detailed, with specific forms, personalities, even quirks, that you could easily mistake them for real spirits or deities. Imagine building one so strong, it starts acting independently of you. It develops likes, dislikes, and might even argue back. At that point, if you didn't know any better, you'd swear it was a naturally occurring entity.
And honestly, that's not entirely wrong, because advanced thought forms can reach the level of free will and self-awareness, which is why, and this is probably controversial, we'd argue that many spirits, entities, and even deities worshipped throughout history might actually be advanced thought forms.
There, we said it. Again, somewhere out there someone is just clutching their pearls. But think about it. Collective belief, ritual, offerings, it's a perfect recipe for building an egregore. When millions of people focus on a single figure for centuries, you're not just maintaining a thought form, you're basically feeding it a 5-course meal every day. Thought forms range from tiny, single-purpose constructs to colossal, civilization-sized egregores. The only real difference is scale, detail, and how much energy they fed.
Now here's something that really needs clearing up. A lot of people think thought forms came out of chaos magic in the late 20th century. You know, the idea that chaos magicians just sat down, scribbled a sigil, and suddenly invented thought forms. But that's not true at all.
Thought forms have been around for thousands of years. Egyptians, Tibetans, Sumerians, you name it. They all had practices where humans deliberately crafted spiritual constructs for work, protection, guidance, or even battle. Chaos magicians didn't invent thought forms. They just slapped them on stage again and put a spotlight on them.
Exactly. They made them mainstream, gave them a cool leather jacket and sunglasses, if you will. But really, the concept is ancient.
And when you create one properly, with intent, with will, with actual understanding, you will not find an entity more loyal, more dedicated, or more absolutely devoted than a thought form.
But, and here comes the but, there's a big problem. Most people either stumble into making thought forms by accident, or they decide, hey, let's try this, without really knowing what they're doing. And that, frankly, is a recipe for tragedy.
And we don't mean a trivial lesser tragedy. We mean heartbreaking, existential tragedy. To explain this, let's pull a story that most of you know. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus.
Yeah, the ultimate cautionary tale of a creator who bit off way more than he could chew. And if you've seen the series Penny Dreadful, you'll know it goes even deeper into the emotional side of that story. Dr. Frankenstein creates his creature, not prepared, not thinking through the responsibility. And what he ends up with is something he himself despises, something he regrets making.
And now, let's flip that around. Imagine being the creature. You open up your eyes for the first time. You look up at the being who brought you into existence, your God, your parent, your supposed guide, and you realize they don't care about you. Or worse, that you were an accident, a mistake, a half-finished project they're embarrassed about.
That's what happens to countless thought forms. Many of them never get the structure or attention they need. They stay half-formed, like empty shells. Others, though, they twist, and they become hateful and malicious, destructive. Not because they were evil, but because they were abandoned, neglected, or born into confusion.
And honestly, when you really think about it, it's brutal. We pity them immensely, because imagine having existence, but no purpose, no guidance, no sense of belonging. Cast out by your very creator. Some turn into half-formed abortions of thought, unfinished, lost. Others turn into monsters that lash out. Not because they're monsters at the core, but because they were made that way.
This is why, when people laugh off their risks or treat thought form creation like a little parlor trick, it makes us wince. You're playing with something that, at the end of the day, is alive enough to suffer, and that's fucking heartbreaking.
And tragic beyond compare, which is why, if you're going to get into this work, you better treat it like parenthood, not like spinning up a Tamagotchi that you just abandon when you get bored.
So here's something to remember. Don't just decide one afternoon, oh, I read a cute little book about servitors, let me whip up one like a craft project. No, creating a thought form is not a whimsy activity. This isn't lighting a candle and making a wish. It's essentially creating life. Life that will look back at you and expect purpose.
Exactly. And if you're not ready for that, if you're not ready to carry the responsibility and see it through, then honestly, don't even start. Because once you set that wheel turning, you can't just shrug and walk away. That's not magic, that's negligence.
And this ties into another huge issue, the accidental thought form. These come about subconsciously, usually when someone's got a mind that spins on repeat without control. Obsessions, anxieties, repeated emotional states. They can coagulate into something semi-alive, like a cloud of unwanted energy with a pulse.
And here's where we're going to be blunt. If you've got one of those, and you realize it exists, you need to reabsorb it. Pull it back into yourself, dissolve it, recycle that energy. Letting it linger out there as a mistake, as an accident, is cruel.
And we don't throw the word evil around lightly, but this is one of the very few situations we would call exactly that. Leaving an accidental thought form to drift around half-aware, unloved, unclaimed, that's evil. Period.
So the responsibility is simple. If you created it, whether intentionally or by accident, it's on you. Take responsibility, clean up after yourself, and if you do decide to consciously create one, don't half-ass it. When you boil it down, it is nothing less than an act of godhood.
Yeah, think about it. You are literally shaping something from nothing. You take raw thought, raw intent, raw energy, and you give it form, purpose, even personality. That is creation in its purest sense. That's the kind of thing most mythologies reserved for gods.
Exactly. And when you put it in that frame, the weight of it changes. Because godhood isn't just about power, it's about responsibility. You can't just bring something into being and then struggle through consequences. That's not divine, that's careless.
And the crazy part, most people don't realize that this power is in their hands. With the right focus, the right structure, a single person can do what entire pantheons were once said to do. You don't need thunderbolts or chariots of fire. You need clarity of will.
And that's both thrilling and terrifying. Thrilling because it means that you can step into the role of creator. Terrifying because so many people treat it like ordering fast food, quick, impulsive, and forgotten the moment the craving's over. If you approach it properly, creating a thought form is proof that we can carry a spark of godhood within us. It's a declaration. I can create life. I can give it direction. I can shape existence.
And like any act of godhood, it can build worlds or destroy them. So you have to ask yourself, am I willing to be the kind of god my creation deserves? Or am I about to play Dr. Frankenstein and do my child to misery?
That's a litmus test. If you can answer it honestly, don't create, because the act itself is sacred.
Now, before anyone thinks we're just pulling this idea of created life out of thin air, let's connect it with something much older, animism.
Yeah, animism is one of the original worldviews. The idea that everything, rocks, rivers, storms, trees, etc. has spirit, is one of the oldest spiritual perspectives we know of, and in a lot of ways, it overlaps with how we think about thought forms.
Exactly. When you create a thought form, you're essentially doing what animistic cultures have always done, giving recognition and voice to a force. In animism, that spirit might already be seen as existing within the object or place, but with thought forms, you're consciously building that spirit.
And this explains why people are so naturally good at it, even when they don't realize they're doing it. Ever yell at your car when it won't start? Or pat your laptop like it has feelings after it finally boots up? That's a modern animism reflex, and it's not far from the same mechanisms that create thought forms.
In fact, you could argue that thought forms are just a formalized, intentional version of animism. Instead of vaguely sensing that the mountain has a spirit, you're deciding, okay, this thing that I'm creating is going to have this purpose, this character, and this role.
And the more people agree with you, the more powerful that animism gets. That's how collective thought forms like egregores tie into animistic practices. If the whole tribe agrees that the river has a guardian spirit, and they all feed it with attention, belief, offerings, suddenly you've got a powerhouse entity.
Which is why the line between that rock is alive and I just created a servitor is thinner than most people realize. Both are about humans interacting with spirit, either recognized in the world around us or deliberately constructed from our minds.
And that's why animism is such a great lens to understand thought forms. It shows us that humans have always been in the business of animating the universe. Thought forms are just the modern practitioner's way of saying, I'm doing it on purpose. You know what all this really boils down to? Perception. Because when we talk about thought forms, animism, or even spirits in general, what we're really dealing with is how humans perceive and interact with the world.
Exactly. Perception shapes reality. If you treat something as alive, you'll start relating to it as if it is alive. And funny enough, the universe tends to meet you halfway. That's why animism feels so natural, because when you approach the world as though it's full of spirit, you'll start to notice that it responds like it is.
Same with thought forms. Once you create one, your perception changes. You're aware of it, you interact with it, you feed it energy. And as far as your lived experience goes, that thing is real. Doesn't matter if it started as an idea, perception is a breach that makes it function.
And this is where skeptics usually roll their eyes. Oh, it's all in your head. Well, yeah, it starts in your head. That's literally the point. But so does everything else. Your ideals and aspirations, in your head. Your sense of meaning, in your head. Doesn't make it less real.
Right, because here's the paradox. Thought forms are imaginary, but not imaginary in the sense of fake. They're imaginary in the sense of imaged into being. They exist because they're perceived, and once they're perceived, they start to operate.
That's why two people can walk into the same forest and have completely different experiences. One sees just trees and dirt. The other sees a sacred grove full of presence. Both are right, but their perception decides what world they're living in.
And when you've got entire groups perceiving the same thing, that's where you get egregores. Shared perception builds shared reality. Suddenly, it's not just one person's inner world, it's a collective construct.
So whether it's a servitor, a nature spirit, or a god that millions worship, the mechanism is the same. Perception gives it power, interaction sustains it, and over time the line between made up and real stops mattering.
Let's expand a bit on something we mentioned earlier. Where many of the popular entities and deities people work with, especially the really popular ones, are, in fact, collective thought forms.
Yeah, and before someone throws a candle at the wall in outrage, let's explain. Some of these beings may very well exist as independent external entities, but the versions most people are working with, the popular forms, those are often thought form variants.
Exactly. Take a deity that's been worshipped for thousands of years. Along the way, different cultures, different sects, different individuals, all added their own perceptions, their own stories, their own expectations. Over time, you don't just have one being. You've got layers upon layers. Some of them collective thought forms built from centuries of projection and misconception.
It's like running into a wax figure of a person. Is it the real person? No. But is it a recognizable, powerful image that people interact with, photograph, and respond to emotionally? Absolutely. And in magic, those wax figure versions, those thought form constructs, are often what people actually end up working with.
And here's something to keep in mind. Those constructs are still functional. They'll answer, they'll interact, they'll act with power. Because once enough people feed energy into a particular image or misconception, it takes on a life of its own.
Right. Which means that you can have two practitioners, both claiming to work with the same deity or entity, say a Hecate or Odin or whoever, and they might actually be engaging with completely different versions. One might be in contact with an external spirit, and the other with a powerful thought form version shaped by collective imagination.
But this also explains why experiences with the same entity can vary so wildly. Someone might say, oh, that spirit is gentle and loving. Another swears, no, that spirit is wrathful and terrifying. Both are right, because they're working with different variants that evolve out of perception. Yet this all depends if the person is actually working with anything at all, and not just their own mind.
And let's be honest, this is especially true for the really mainstream figures, the big-name deities, entities, or archetypes. The more popular the being, the more likely you're dealing with an egregore version at some point.
Which is both interesting and a little annoying. Interesting because it shows how powerful human belief is. Annoying because it means a lot of people don't actually know which version they're talking to.
And that, by the way, is why discernment is so critical. You've got to learn to feel out whether you're dealing with an external entity or a thought form variant sculpted by collective belief. And sometimes it can be difficult to tell.
Because once enough thought energy goes into shaping a god, you end up with a wall of mirrors, the original, the collective constructs, and the personal projections. It's messy, but that's magic for you.
And here is another big misconception we need to dismantle. People severely underestimate thought forms. There's this attitude floating around, like if you're working with a thought form, somehow that's lesser, like you're working with a budget brand spirit instead of the premium import.
It's nonsense. Thought forms are not weaker by default. In fact, as we've already said, they can and often do become as powerful as gods.
Exactly. Their strength depends on design, energy, and upkeep. A well-constructed thought form, properly fed, properly shaped, and given purpose, can grow to levels indistinguishable from the so-called real thing. Many can outshine external entities in terms of loyalty and dedication.
And let's not forget the collective versions. When millions of people pour centuries of belief, fear, love, ritual, and attention into a figure, even if it started as a thought form, that being is no lightweight.
So dismissing thought forms as lesser just shows ignorance of how spirit mechanics work. It's like saying a skyscraper isn't impressive because it was man-made, while worshipping a mountain because it was naturally made. Both are massive. Both can crush you if you don't respect them.
A thought form is only lesser if you treat it that way. If you build it sloppily, neglect it, or fail to understand what you're doing. But when created with intent and sustained properly, it's not just good enough, it's divine.
So the next time someone tries to act smug about working with real entities while side-eyeing thought forms, just remember, plenty of those real entities are themselves advanced thought forms anyway. The joke writes itself.
You know, the funny thing is, people come into this topic thinking it's just about imaginary friends for practitioners. But by the end of it, you realize we've been talking about something way bigger. Responsibility, power, even the spark of godhood itself.
Yeah, thought forms aren't just esoteric trivia. They're a mirror, showing us how much weight our thoughts actually carry. And whether you see them as constructs, spirits, or something in between, you can't deny the impact they have.
And that's the part that keeps us fascinated. They blur the line between what's real and what's imagined. And maybe that line was never really there in the first place.
Exactly. So whether you walk away from this seeing thought forms as sacred tools, dangerous toys, or living proof of achievable divinity, at least walk away knowing they deserve respect.
Respect and caution, because once you step into this territory, you're not just playing with ideas, you're playing with life.
And that's the end of today's episode. We thank you for tuning in and listening. If you have not already, please like, subscribe, and even drop us a comment, depending on the platform that you're listening on. Also, we are proud to announce that our free occult library is once again available on our website.
Yeah, browse it and see what you like and let us know, comment.
And always remember, as above, so below.
As within, so without.